What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers. And if you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So today I want to talk about how we are going to turn an existing stand location into a pinch point. Now, I've heard every reason in the book pretty close of why we have these stands, where they are. It could be that it's always been a great stand location, that we've had great success here. We just want to improve it a little bit more by turning it into a pinch point. The other thing is it could be that we just are kind of limited on where we can hunt for our area, and this stand might not be the best one out there, but again, we can improve it by turning it into a pinch point. Then, of course, there's always the reason of,
Uncle Donnie shot a 10-pointer out of that stand 30 years ago. It's one of our best stands. We gotta hunt it. Of course, we haven't seen anything out of that stand in 20 years.
So first we want to understand why pinch points are so effective and how easy they are to build for us. So when we are trying to think of like what the deer has in mind, the deer are very efficient creatures. They want to move through the path of least resistance in the woods. They work very hard for those calories, and they don't want to burn them up by like busting through the woods through a ton of thick cover or just going up like a ton of like steep topography or whatever. So when we're trying to create a pinch point, we have to keep that in mind. We have to make it easier for the deer to move through our pinch point than it is for them to move through the adjacent area. And that, of course, is the very simple way of how we create a pinch point. Now, there are a ton of tools in the tool bag of how to achieve this, and I'm going to go over them individually in this video. But first of all, we have to understand of where is this existing stand location? Is this existing stand location in thick cover? Even the most novice of hunter can figure out that deer are typically in the thicker parts of the woods than standing out in the middle of an open field in the middle of the day, unless of course they were pressured and pushed there by another hunter or something. So a lot of these existing stand locations may be in thick areas of cover in the woods, and there's a certain strategy to turning those into a pinch point. But what if you're out in the open, or you're in the open woods, you're in an open field? What can we do to turn those areas into pinch points as well? Now, when you're driving down the highway and you see a stand out there in the middle of an open field and it's 500 yards to the nearest tree in any direction. Now, just keep in mind that we're not going to turn a stand location like that into a pinch point. That is a guy who is not hunting food or cover. That guy is hunting pressure. He is planning on somebody else pushing deer out into those fields for him so that he can get a 500-yard running shot at a deer. And those stands end up not being all that successful unless you got guys who are just overwatching food sources from very far away from those locations. So we're definitely talking about areas where we have something to work with. We're not going to turn those big open stand locations into pinch points. It's just not possible with how open they are. So let's start with those stands that are in the thick areas of the woods. And this is one of my favorite things to do because it's something I've been doing since a little kid with my dad and grandpa walking through the deer woods when we were trying to set up stand locations for them before I was even old enough to hunt. So this year is my 26th deer season, and this is something that every time I walk in the woods I do this, and it is just the simple act of opening up a thicker area of the woods in a trail to allow the deer an easier access trail through that specific area of the woods. So we would do this by just simply snapping off branches that maybe we're going to whack the guy behind you in the face as you're walking through the woods. And after a while, the deer just start walking those trails too, because it's the path of least resistance through the woods. Now, there's a little bit of a strategy of how you want to design these. And so what you want to do is create an hourglass shape. You want to have, basically think of all of that sand falling through an hourglass as all of the deer kind of filtering through to a pinch point. And that, of course, is going to be where your stand location is. And then it kind of opens back up on the other side to let them go wherever they want to go. Well, what we want to do is kind of create a spider web of trails inside that hourglass that feed to that one central location. So what you want to do is kind of go off into your woods in any direction from the stand location you have in mind. Find the existing trails that are there and just start opening up the trail by snapping branches off, going in there with like a snips or a loppers. You can use a chainsaw depending on how big these trees are and what you're dealing with in your situation. But you want to open up these trails to feed into that hourglass, the middle of that hourglass, and that's going to be your pinch point. Now, when you're doing this, though, keep in mind that you do not want to be making these straight, like shooting lane trails. Deer will absolutely avoid being in an open area like that for too long. So if you're in the thickest area of the woods and you cut a trail straight through the woods that is 100 yards long and as wide as a four-wheeler, the deer will avoid that. They will crisscross it, but they will not walk down it. They're in that thick area of the woods for a reason. You don't want to make it an open area of the woods. So make sure that these trails you're creating just kind of zig and zag their way to that pinch point. The deer will absolutely love them. And they only have to be as big as just you walking through, so that you're not getting hit in the face with a stick or brushing up your arms or legs against sticks as you're walking through these areas. By no means do they have to be as big as like a four-wheeler or whatever. Just make them so that you can easily walk on them and the deer will absolutely follow them right to your pinch point. Now, the reason why we're shaping these in the shape of an hourglass is obviously it's creating a pinch point, but what we're doing with that area outside of the hourglass is allowing you to ingress and egress from this stand location. So these are existing stand locations we're talking about in this video, but you may want to put another stand on the other side of this pinch point so that you can pick which one of the two to sit in depending on what your wind is doing for this location on this day. Also, always keep that wind direction in mind when you're coming in and out of these locations as well. So use the side of the hourglass to get in and out depending on which way your wind is blowing to, because you don't want to be just painting scent off into like a bedding area or something if this pinch point's between, like, say, a bedding area and a food source, and you're going to sit here on a PM sit and wait for them to head to that food source. So just keep that wind in mind where that's getting painted off into the woods when you're getting in and out of these locations as well. And then of course we absolutely want to sweeten up the middle of this, that absolute middle of the pinch point. We're going to do that. We're definitely going to want to put a mock scrape there. If you have time, throw a water hole in there too. But these are things that are going to make it even more attractive for them to hit up that exact pinch point right in front of your stand location. Put it as far from your stand as you feel comfortable making a great shot. Now, next I want to talk about if this stand location is in an open area. So this could be just like open hardwoods. It could be like an open field of some sort. Not that like guy that's got 500 yards and no cover in any direction of his stand. Like I said, that's going to be way too difficult for any of these strategies to work. I would just find a new stand location. But if you are in an open area, what we need to do now is close down those open areas. So I was working on a property and these people had a situation where they had two big open fields on either end, which created a natural hourglass shape and a natural pinch point. The only problem was the middle of that pinch point was 100 yards wide. So like I was just saying, when you want to hunt these hourglasses, you don't want to be sitting in the middle of them. You want to be on either side of them. So this middle was like moderate cover. There was no way if you sat on one side of the hourglass that you were going to be able to see all the way across that 100 yards of cover. And then sitting in the middle of it, you now have deer coming from every which way. You're going to blow them out. It's just not a great way to hunt a location like that. So what can we do if we have a 100-yard pinch point? We got to make it smaller. So what can we do? So first of all, I want to cover this first thing because guys have done it and they've had great success doing it. Not my favorite thing to do, but I'm going to cover it. You can literally put a fence up in the woods. Guys have taken like snow fence, unraveled it, unrolled it out in the woods, tacked it up to some trees, and literally forced the deer to go around the fence. There's a lot of guys that just hunt fence lines where there's a hole in the fence, and they get a lot of success there because the deer know where that hole in the fence is and they'll come right through that. That does work. I just don't think it's very aesthetically pleasing to your woods, and it's much more expensive than the other options that will create the same exact effect. So you can, by all means, go put a fence up, get those deer to move exactly where you want them to. Just keep in mind when we're creating these fences or this cover to force them into somewhere, we do not want them to feel trapped. Deer will not go into like a cow pasture, a fenced off area that they have no escape because they know that then a predator can pin them in there. So they definitely want to feel like they can escape, but what we're going to create here is going to make them move to a specific spot because it's going to be the most efficient place for them to go, but they'll still have the option to get out going through the other parts and the thicker parts that we're going to create here. So instead of a fence, the thing that I absolutely love to do is just hinge cut some trees. If you're in the big woods and you have the opportunity to drop some trees, get in there, just hinge cut them. Don't cut them all the way through because the tree will stay alive and that'll create browse for your deer herd as well. So you're getting like two birds, one stone here. But what you want to do is kind of drop trees in a way that it's going to make it difficult for the deer to move through that specific area. And they're going to, of course, kind of wind around and go through that open area, which is going to be your pinch point. So We can do this with brush, we can do this with trees. If you're maybe putting in a food plot or something, or you're cutting down some other trees on your property for whatever reason, just create brush piles to kind of force the deer to move where you want to move. But keep in mind to keep it open. So I always like to think, for those of you guys who have fished the Mississippi, there are wing dams under the water that make the current stay in the middle of the river. So there's all these like sort of dams that come out and push the water into the middle where all the buoys are, where all the big barges travel up and down the Mississippi. But what you're doing here with these trees is kind of the same thing. Like, you don't want to just build a wall, but kind of like push them in this direction with this one, and then kind of push them back in this other direction with this other one, until you kind of get their flow of movement going exactly where you want it to go. And that's what you're looking to do here. Now, if you aren't in the big woods, if you're more in an area with like an open field, maybe marsh grass, things of that nature, now what you can do here is plant shrubs and stuff. I have videos on how to clone red osier dogwood, which is great for those wet areas. Get those shrubs growing. You can grow other things like switchgrass and stuff as well. Anything that'll like kind of push deer to a more open area, because they don't want to be going through this cluster of, say, small trees, shrubs, whatever it is. This is going to take a little bit longer to get established, obviously. But I've also found that if you guys are in like an open field, maybe you have waist-high grass or whatever, simply mowing a path through that grass, even though it seems like it's an open area, we go back to the first part of this video, you're making that easy line of movement through the grass. Now, remember to zigzag it, not a straight line. They will actually follow that mowed path or weed whacked path through the grass instead of walking through the grass. So you kind of are in an area of cover if you think about it that way, and that'll work for you great in those situations as well. Then, of course, just like the other pinch point, we want to put in a mock scrape and a water hole at that very middle of that pinch point. That's just going to give them that extra incentive to make sure they go right to that point. Stop for a couple seconds so that you have a shot on them if you want it. And again, put stand locations on either side of this pinch point. It'll work out great for you. And keep in mind that ingress egress with the wind direction as well. Now, lastly, I just want to cover using food plots to do this same exact thing. So a lot of guys think food plots, they think big rectangle, big oval, big whatever in the woods, in the field with stuff planted in it. I absolutely love planting my food plots in shapes other than all of those. So I love planting boomerang shape food plots. I love planting sort of snake shaped food plots. So you're essentially taking one of these trails that you opened up, making it a little wider, and planting a food plot in there. So now they will browse through this plot as they move through. These aren't going to be like destination plots. These aren't going to be plots that they come to and feed on for a long period of time, but they will want to browse through them as they come through the area. And by making them in like an L shape, boomerang shape, you can really influence them to turn a certain way, move through the woods a certain way. They'll follow that edge of that food plot and come right out the other end, where again, you make one of these trails or whatever, lead off to your pinch point if the little food plot, the kill plot, whatever, isn't the actual pinch point itself. So if you guys enjoy the B-roll on this video, I know a lot of you guys are always looking for trail cameras. If you like the quality of mine, I will leave them linked down in the description so you can go check those out. I've had no problems with them. They're awesome cameras. If you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out that one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.